They say the most dangerous books are the ones you don't know you're not supposed to read. It doesn't sit on your local library shelf. It's not featured on bestseller lists. And yet, for centuries, whispers of it have echoed through abbeys, occult circles, and secret societies. A book not merely rumored to contain forbidden knowledge, but said to contain rituals for summoning demons. And it's real. The book is called the Grand Grimoire. Some call it Dragon Rouge, the Red Dragon. It's not the creation of a novelist or a prop from a horror film. Physical copies exist. It has been studied by scholars, banned by the church, sought after by occultists, and feared by many who understand its contents. But what exactly is this book? Who wrote it? What does it claim to do? And perhaps most importantly, why has it survived across centuries, shrouded in fear and fascination? This isn't a journey into fantasy. There are no jump scares here. No invented legends or exaggerated superstitions. This is a story about a very real book born in a time when magic and religion coexisted in uneasy tension. A book whose pages are filled with elaborate rituals, cryptic language, and instructions to contact beings said to exist beyond the veil of human understanding. We will trace its origins, examine its contents, look at the people who feared it, those who worshipped it, and those who studied it. And we'll explore why, despite all our advancements, we're still drawn to the idea of books that contain knowledge so powerful, so dangerous, that it must be hidden. This is the story of the Grand Grimoire, the book that was never meant to be opened. To understand the Grand Grimoire, we have to go back, not just to the year it was supposedly written, but to the intellectual climate that allowed such a book to exist. The earliest known printed editions of the Grand Grimoire date to the 19th century. But inside, the book claims to be much older. The author attributes its creation to the year 1520. That's 2 decades after the Spanish Inquisition had reached full force, 1 year before Martin Luther's translation of the New Testament was printed, and decades before Galileo looked at the stars. It was a time of upheaval. The Renaissance was igniting human curiosity and scientific thought, but belief in magic, angels, and demons was still interwoven into everyday life. Books weren't just for knowledge, they were repositories of power. And the Grand Grimoire wasn't the only one of its kind. Grimoires, books of magic, spells, rituals, had existed for centuries. They were often handwritten, sometimes copied from older sources, and passed from practitioner to practitioner in secret. They bore names like the Key of Solomon, the Book of Abramelin, and the Picatrix. Many drew from Jewish, Christian, Arabic, and Greco-Roman mystical traditions. But the Grand Grimoire stood out. Unlike many grimoires, it claimed to teach the reader how to summon specific demons, not just in theory, but in structured detail, with sigils, rituals, tools, and hierarchies. Its instructions weren't poetic or symbolic. They were procedural, almost mechanical. The implication wasn't merely communication, it was control. According to the text, these rituals allowed one to summon Lucifer himself, along with his lieutenants, Beelzebub and Astaroth. And not only summon, but to compel. That's the part that disturbed many who came across it. The idea that a human could force obedience from a being considered the embodiment of rebellion. But who actually wrote the Grand Grimoire? That remains a mystery. Some versions claim the author was Honorius of Thebes, a legendary figure sometimes cited in other occult texts. Others attribute it to an even more mythical source, Lucifer himself. Of course, neither claim holds up to academic scrutiny. More likely, the Grand Grimoire was compiled over time, borrowing from earlier grimoires and folk traditions. Its real authorship, much like its purpose, is obscured by layers of myth and intention. It's also important to note the linguistic clues. The original texts were in French, not Latin, a detail that situates the book within a more vernacular tradition. This was a text meant to be read by practitioners, not hidden away by clergy. It echoed earlier Latin grimoires but was designed for a different audience, one outside the church and perhaps outside its protection. By the time we reach the 18th and 19th centuries, the Grand Grimoire is no longer just an underground text. It's part of a wider current of magical revivalism where secret knowledge was once again being hunted, printed, and read. But we'll get to that in time. For now, understand this. The Grand Grimoire did not appear from nowhere. It was born from centuries of belief, fear, and the enduring human desire to reach beyond what is permitted. It is not just a book, it is a reflection of an era. What makes the Grand Grimoire different from other ancient books is not its age or obscurity, but its precision. The book is divided into two main parts. The first outlines the hierarchy of demons and the means to summon them. The second contains instructions for pacts, protections, and ritual tools. This structure makes it almost clinical in its presentation. It doesn't read like myth or poetry. It reads like a manual. The central goal of the Grand Grimoire is to enable the reader, call the operator, to summon and control a specific trio of demons: Lucifer, Beelzebub, and Astaroth. Lucifer is listed as Emperor of Hell, common designation in early modern demonology. Beelzebub is described as the Prince, and Astaroth as the Grand Duke. Together, they form a kind of unholy trinity, each responsible for different domains of infernal power. The operator is told how to summon them through a complex ritual involving planetary timing, sacred geometry, specific invocations, and a set of ritual tools: a wand, a pinnacle, consecrated candles, and a circle of protection drawn on the ground. The book provides detailed diagrams of magical sigils, unique symbols believed to represent the demons being summoned. These sigils, still studied today by scholars of Western esotericism, are geometric, intricate, and often surrounded by Latin or Hebrew inscriptions. Some editions include invocations in both Latin and French, reflecting the blending of older ecclesiastical traditions with vernacular magic. Perhaps most notably, the Grand Grimoire includes what it calls the Infernal Pact. This is a written agreement, a contract the practitioner is to sign, often symbolically in blood, stating their intentions and the expected outcome. This pact doesn't always involve selling one's soul, as popular culture suggests. In many versions, it is transactional, asking for knowledge, wealth, or power in return for offerings or service. That said, the implications of such rituals were never taken lightly. Even among occult practitioners, the Grand Grimoire has long been considered one of the more dangerous texts, not because its magic necessarily works, but because of its unambiguous purpose: domination over beings traditionally considered evil. Scholars often compare it to the Lemegidon, also known as the Lesser Key of Solomon, another grimoire from roughly the same period, which also deals with summoning spirits. But while the Key of Solomon divides spirits into multiple orders and emphasizes angelic protections, the Grand Grimoire is far more direct. It seeks to command rather than negotiate. Another peculiar feature is the timing. The text places heavy emphasis on planetary hours, a system derived from classical astrology in which each hour of the day is governed by a different planet. Certain rituals must be conducted under specific planetary influences, particularly on Tuesdays at night, which were traditionally linked to Mars, the planet of action, danger, and conflict. This blending of astrological timing, Christian references, and pre-Christian magical traditions makes the Grand Grimoire a dense artifact of cultural syncretism. It is not just a book of spells. It's a window into how people of earlier centuries understood power, danger, and the unknown. And this is what makes it so unnerving. Whether or not the book works is almost beside the point. Its mere existence, a book calmly instructing its reader to summon infernal powers, raises questions about intent, belief, and the fragile line between knowledge and taboo. The Grand Grimoire did not circulate freely. In a Europe still dominated by religious institutions, books like this weren't merely controversial, they were criminal. The Roman Catholic Church had long maintained a strict index of prohibited texts, and grimoires fell squarely into the category of forbidden knowledge. Known as the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, or list of prohibited books, the Church's catalog was first published in 1559 under Pope Paul IV. It would continue to evolve until it was formally abolished in 1966. During those 4 centuries, hundreds of titles were banned, burned, or hidden, including works of theology, science, and magic. The Grand Grimoire's presence on this list was not always explicit, as copies were rare and often circulated anonymously. But texts of its type, books dealing with necromancy, demonology, and ritual magic, were aggressively condemned. Mere possession could result in accusations of heresy, a charge that could end in torture or death. This was not mere censorship, it was spiritual warfare. To the authorities of the time, books like the Grand Grimoire were more than superstition. They were portals, manuals that opened contact between humans and forces considered not just evil, but seductive, corrupting, and defiant of divine order. The Church's fear wasn't just about what the book said, it was about what it enabled. Power over demons, power over natural law, power that circumvented religious hierarchy. It wasn't just heresy, it was rebellion. Because of this, copies of the Grand Grimoire were hunted. Some were confiscated by inquisitors, others destroyed. Many were hidden, buried in the private libraries of alchemists, mystics, and fringe theologians. The few copies that survived into the modern age often bore no title, no author, no printing information. They were anonymous for a reason. Interestingly, not all church figures rejected the book in the same way. Records suggest that certain exorcists were instructed to familiarize themselves with the structure and contents of grimoires like the Grand Grimoire, not to practice them, but to recognize their influence. In cases where individuals were believed to be under demonic oppression, familiarity with these texts could help clergy understand what rituals have been attempted, what symbols invoked, and what spiritual doors may have been opened. In rare documented cases, even educated clergy admitted that some of the invocations mirrored ancient prayers and pre-Christian formulas, raising theological concerns about the blurred boundary between prayer, ritual, and magic. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Europe had begun its slow march towards secularization, but the Grand Grimoire retained its status as dangerous. Enlightenment thinkers often dismissed such books as relics of superstition. Yet many copies continued to circulate in secret, especially in rural areas, where folk beliefs and local magic traditions persisted long after the Enlightenment had swept through the capitals. In France, where the Grand Grimoire was most often found, it reportedly influenced local occult groups, spiritist circles, and later 19th century ceremonial magicians. Some folkloric accounts describe the book being kept under floorboards, in locked chests, or wrapped in black cloth to prevent its energy from leaking. But despite its enduring mythos, there's little evidence of the book being used en masse. It was not a book for crowds. It was a book for the isolated, the curious, the desperate. It lived in the margins, feared by the church, hidden by its owners, protected by anonymity, and because of that, it survived. By the 19th century, Europe was entering a new phase, not just of industry and science, but of spiritual reawakening. In the cities, factories churned, railroads expanded, electricity promised to light the dark. But in the shadows of that progress, another movement was stirring, a revival of occult knowledge. It was during this time that the Grand Grimoire re-emerged. Amid the rise of spiritualism, mesmerism, and esoteric societies, ancient magical texts were being rediscovered, translated, and reprinted. Libraries were combed for manuscripts. Secret orders were founded in attics and back rooms. The forbidden was not only tolerated, it was fashionable. The Grand Grimoire, once hidden from public view, now gained new attention. By the 1800s, editions of the Grand Grimoire were being printed in France and Italy, often with ornate covers and cryptic illustrations. Publishers marketed them not as hoaxes or curiosities, but as genuine magical tools. Some copies were sold with ritual kits, candles, powders, ceremonial daggers. These versions framed the text not just as literature, but as a practical system of infernal invocation. Occultists of the time embraced the grimoire's structure. Unlike the mysticism of earlier Christian texts, the Grand Grimoire had clarity. It had names, hierarchies, diagrams, and procedures. It felt systematic, almost scientific. In an era fascinated by both alchemy and rationalism, this blend of order and mystery appealed deeply. Figures like Eliphas Levi, one of the most influential occult thinkers of the era, referred to the tradition surrounding grimoires, though he focused more on symbolism than direct practice. Later, the English magician Aleister Crowley, known for his unorthodox spiritual theories and self-styled antinomian persona, helped bring grimoires like the Grand Grimoire into the English-speaking world's consciousness. Though Crowley didn't work directly from it, the echoes of its logic, its structure of command, its invocation of names, can be seen in his work. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the book was being republished and translated across Europe. It became a collector's item, an object of fascination among occult circles. Some treated it as a relic, others, more daringly, as a tool. It's important to emphasize that not everyone who sought the Grand Grimoire believed in its power. Many were drawn to it as symbolism, a mirror of psychological archetypes or spiritual inquiry. But there were always a few who believed literally. Accounts exist, though mostly anecdotal, of rituals attempted using the book's instructions. Most ended with fear, confusion, or silence. Few were ever repeated. Whether because of real effects or the power of suggestion, Those who truly tried the book's rituals rarely did so twice. And then came modernity. With the advent of the printing press, the Grand Grimoire lost its exclusivity. With mass printing came dilution, parody, and reinterpretation. Yet even today, original editions, especially pre-20th century copies, remain rare, expensive, and cloaked in reputation. In some traditions, it is still considered a cursed object. In others, a sacred one. In either case, it refuses to die. Where the occult world sees mystery and power, the academic world sees something else entirely, a text to be studied, not feared. The Grand Grimoire has long attracted scholarly attention, not because of its supernatural claims, but because of what it reveals about the societies that produced and preserved it. Historians of religion, literature, and folklore see the book as a rich document of cultural history, one that straddles the boundary between faith and fiction. At the heart of the debate lies a simple question: is it real? Not in the sense of magical efficacy, but authorship, intent, and usage. And here, the answers are more grounded than many expect. Most scholars believe the Grand Grimoire was not written in 1520, as some editions claim, but much later, likely during the 18th century. This conclusion is drawn from linguistic patterns, printing techniques, and references within the text itself. The style of French, the type of paper used, and the structure of the spells suggest a more modern creation. The claim of 16th century origin may have been a deliberate fabrication, common in occult literature. By backdating the text, its authors lended an aura of ancient authority. This was not uncommon. Grimoires often claimed fictitious authorship by biblical or legendary figures to increase their mystique. The author listed in some versions, Honorius of Thebes, is likely a symbolic reference. While there are medieval texts that mention a Pope Honorius involved in magic, there is no credible historical evidence linking any real person by that name to the Grand Grimoire. Scholars also point out that the text is an amalgamation, drawing heavily from earlier magical manuscripts. Some passages appear nearly verbatim in other grimoires. The demon hierarchy, the ritual format, and even specific invocations have precedence in texts like the Key of Solomon, the Heptameron, and the Ars Goetia. In this sense, the Grand Grimoire is more of a compilation than an original creation. But this doesn't diminish its significance. What makes the Grand Grimoire valuable to historians is its role in the evolution of Western esotericism. It captures a moment in time when belief, fear, and ritual converged in the written word. It reflects how magical practice was transitioning from oral tradition to print culture, from secret knowledge passed hand to hand, to published documents with standardized instructions. Sensationalists, however, continue to treat the Grand Grimoire as a literal portal to the demonic. In modern conspiracy theories, paranormal media, and certain fringe spiritual movements, the book is sometimes presented as dangerous or cursed. Some websites claim it has been used in unsolved criminal rituals. Others assert that its instructions have led to unexplained phenomena. There is no verified evidence for any of these claims. What exists, instead, is a paper trail of fascination, collectors seeking original editions, researchers analyzing the text, and cultural historians placing it within the broader tapestry of occult literature. The divide between scholar and sensationalist is not just academic. It reflects how we choose to interpret the past, as a source of insight or as a source of fear. For many, the Grand Grimoire remains both. In the modern age, the Grand Grimoire has transformed. No longer confined to private libraries or underground circles, it has entered public consciousness, repurposed, reimagined, and at times completely fictionalized. It exists now not just as a book, but as a symbol of hidden knowledge, of occult danger, of human curiosity turned toward the forbidden. Film was one of the first mediums to adapt its mythology. Though the Grand Grimoire is rarely named outright in mainstream movies, its structure and tone have inspired countless fictional grimoires, from the Necronomicon and H.P. Lovecraft stories to the cursed books of demonic summoning and horror franchises like Evil Dead, The Ninth Gate, and Hereditary. The trope is familiar: an ancient text, a whispered chant, and a darkness that follows. These portrayals are not historically accurate, but they do reflect cultural anxiety about books that claim too much. The Grand Grimoire, with its detailed rituals and infernal hierarchy, fits perfectly into this narrative. In literature, the book is sometimes referenced directly. Occult-themed novels, both historical and supernatural, often name-check the Grand Grimoire alongside other real magical texts. In Dan Brown's The Lost Symbol and Umberto Eco's Foucault's Pendulum, we see how historical esoterica becomes narrative device, leveraging fact to create believable fiction. In music and visual arts, the influence is more symbolic. Album covers, performance aesthetics, and lyrics in genres like black metal and dark ambient often reference grimoires, demonology, and ancient invocations. The Grand Grimoire becomes not just a source, but a mood, an aesthetic touchstone for the arcane and forbidden. Even video games have taken cues. Titles like Bloodborne, Diablo, and The Witcher borrow liberally from demonological lore. While most players may not know the term Grand Grimoire, they've encountered its spirit. Locked tomes and haunted libraries, rituals that require rare components, demonic bosses bound by runes. These are echoes, stylized, gamified, but rooted in a centuries-old template. More recently, the internet has given the book a second life. On forums, YouTube channels, and Reddit threads, the Grand Grimoire is debated, dissected, and sometimes dramatized. Some treat it seriously, posting translated passages, scanned pages, or even video tutorials. Others use it as a storytelling device, blending fact with fiction to enhance its mystique. But even in these digital corners, one thing remains constant: the book's power to fascinate. Part of that power lies in ambiguity. The Grand Grimoire is real, but so little is definitively known about its origins and uses that it remains open to interpretation. It doesn't belong to a single tradition or community. It exists in the liminal space between history and folklore. And that's why it endures. In every era, we ask similar questions. What knowledge is too dangerous? What doors should remain closed? The Grand Grimoire offers no answers. It simply waits, its pages open to whoever dares to read. In the present day, the Grand Grimoire occupies a strange place. It is no longer whispered about in the dark, but it has not become mundane either. It is accessible, yet elusive, rare, yet not lost. Physical copies of the Grand Grimoire do exist. They can be found in specialized archives, private collections, and antiquarian book markets. Most known versions are printed editions from the 19th century, primarily in French. These are not lavish manuscripts. They are small, unassuming volumes, often with plain covers and little to identify them externally. One of the most well-documented copies is housed at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France in Paris. This edition, published in the 1800s, is cataloged under occult literature and remains available for scholarly consultation. It contains the full ritual instructions, including demon hierarchies and sigils. Other copies are scattered across Europe and North America, mostly in private collections. Some have surfaced at rare book auctions, fetching substantial prices, though often without much fanfare. Due to the book's reputation, sellers tend to avoid overt marketing. Listings refer to it by its alternate name, Le Dragon Rouge, or categorize it simply as esoteric literature. There are also numerous modern reprints and facsimile editions. Some are scholarly, offering side-by-side translations and annotations. Others are marketed to occult practitioners, packaged with ritual paraphernalia or stylized to emphasize mystique. These versions are widely available online and through specialty publishers. But original editions remain rare. Their scarcity is due not just to age, but to historical suppression. Many early copies were destroyed or decayed over time. Others were kept hidden, protected not by locks, but by secrecy. Today, scholars rely on these surviving fragments to reconstruct the text's lineage, noting variations in language, structure, and symbolism between editions. And what about the rituals themselves? Are people still using the book? Here, things grow vague. There are anecdotal reports, blog posts, video confessions, fringe forum discussions of individuals claiming to have performed rituals from the Grand Grimoire. Some describe strange experiences. Others say nothing happened at all. No verified, peer-reviewed study has ever demonstrated the efficacy of the book's rituals, nor has any institution documented a case linked to its use. Still, belief persists. In some corners of the occult community, the Grand Grimoire is treated with respect, either as a historical artifact or a source of symbolic language for ritual. In others, it is viewed with suspicion. Even among those who embrace ceremonial magic, it is sometimes considered too volatile to work with directly. And then there are those who view it as merely cultural, part of the mythos of forbidden knowledge. For them, the Grand Grimoire isn't a tool. It's a story, A story that says something profound about the human need to reach beyond what is known and to give form to our fears through the written word. The book still exists. It still circulates. And its name still carries weight. That is its power. There are books that teach, books that entertain, books that challenge. And then there are books that unsettle, books that persist not because of what they say, but because of what they suggest. The Grand Grimoire is one of those books. Whether written in 1520 or the 18th century, by a mystic, a charlatan, or a scholar of forgotten traditions, it has survived for a reason. Not because it works, necessarily, but because it asks a question we still haven't answered: what knowledge should remain hidden? For centuries, the Grand Grimoire has existed on the edge of legitimacy. It was never canonized, never universally accepted, never widely trusted. But neither was it forgotten. It hovered in the cultural imagination, reappearing at moments when the veil between reason and belief seemed thinnest. Its rituals may be fanciful, its claims impossible to verify. But the fact remains, someone wrote it, someone copied it, someone preserved it. And many over the centuries feared what might happen if someone truly used it. Today, we live in a world of open knowledge. With a few keystrokes, anyone can find a copy of the Grand Grimoire, translated, digitized, annotated. We have more access to ancient secrets than any generation before us. And yet, the danger remains, not in the book, perhaps, but in what we're willing to believe. Because the Grand Grimoire is not just about demons. It's about us. Our desire to control what we don't understand. Our fascination with the forbidden. Our belief that some truths lie beyond morality, beyond safety, beyond comprehension. And so the book endures. It sits in libraries, in museums, in the private vaults of collectors. It flickers across screens and reappears in stories. It whispers its name through time, never loudly, never clearly, just enough to keep us wondering. And maybe that's the real magic. Not the rituals, not the names, but the persistence of an idea that somewhere there exists a book so powerful, so dangerous, it was never meant to be read.